I am being watched. Welcome everyone to Mailfuss TV. I am Peter, and today I'm going to be talking about Person of Interest, Season 3, Episode 6. It's called Mors Praematura, if I pronounced that correctly, hopefully. But yes, welcome to the show. Spoilers for the episode as always. What's instantly fascinating to me about this episode right after the last one is that one of the things I praised in the last one very heavily was that the A plot and the B plot at a certain point came together and they were actually one plot. And it was kind of like different characters were doing different things, and then it kind of naturally crossed paths and then became one thing. This episode does that again. And impressively, it does it in a very different way, which is nice. It doesn't just feel like it's repeating the same trick. This time, it's more of like an orchestrated thing, right? It's not a coincidence this time. This time, it's the machine who's intentionally got different people working on what turns out to be the same case. Namely, we have the Finch and Reese case, although arguably Reese isn't even working on the case for most of the episode. He's working on finding Shaw because Shaw's missing after Root came and got her at the end of last episode. And Root and Shaw are working on something else, but everything turns out to be about the same thing, the same core idea. The machine's orchestrating some grand master plan and seemingly does have some long-term goal, something that she, if I to use Root's terminology here, the pronoun she's picked for it, then it's got a goal. And this entire episode, the story, at least from that perspective, is about saving this super hacker guy who is supposed to be dead. In fact, we spend most of the episode thinking he's dead, but he's actually in CIA custody. He's been illegally detained after he's given up information to the FBI to help put this hacker group away that are kind of this extremist hacker group called the Vigilant, I think the name was. And that's like a big part of the plot of the episode, is introducing these guys who are not gone by any means. I feel like we're going to see them again going forward. But yeah, like I think the way this came together again really elevated everything by the time we got to the end of the episode. Like I was somewhat interested in the main plot. It wasn't like blowing my socks off or anything by that point, but it was interesting seeing Finch be the one who was actually doing the case. Not that we've not seen him take the lead before. We've seen it a few times now, but this was a little bit different because it wasn't because Reese was injured and it wasn't because Reese was in prison. It was because Reese has, Finch has made the choice that Reese should find Shaw, that's more important, and that he believes he can take on this case. So it's Harold getting a bit more confident. We have a couple of guest stars here that are notable. Kirk Acevedo plays the character that Finch is interacting with. He's this, what did they call it? Basically, he's the guy that investigates homes of people who have died to try and figure out who the next of kin are if it's not, immediately obvious because there's a will or whatever, meaning that it's probably people who died younger than normal, right? Because most people who are older will probably prepare a will because they'll get to a certain age and realize they should. But people who are a bit younger might assume incorrectly that, nothing's going to happen to me. I'm only 20, 30, 40, whatever. So that's what he does. And Finch poses as his partner, his new partner doing this job, which is basically just looking through the house and looking for evidence of someone who might still be alive that can basically get all the stuff that belonged to the dead person. And that's what we're doing. But he's secretly investigating this guy. What's his character? Just so I can call him something. Sloan. Sloan is investigating someone else's house that he's not assigned to. And it turns out that it's the main, well, not target, because the person of interest is Sloan. But the main kind of focal point of the episode isn't really him. It's actually his foster brother, who is supposedly dead, and he's the super hacker guy that we find out later is still alive. This is his place that he breaks into effectively at one point. And Finch kind of follows him in and confronts him and accuses him of whatever. And he reveals, no, my foster brother lived here. I was getting a watch that was given to him by my family, and it sets up a bunch of stuff, and basically he wants to figure out why he's dead, because he doesn't believe that he died of a heroin overdose, because he was very adamant about never doing drugs because his parents were both addicts, and that's why he ended up in foster care. So it was something that he was personally very, strongly opinionated about. So he just didn't believe the cover story. So Finch effectively starts helping him look for what happened and who might have killed his brother, and he believes it's this super secret hacker group. And as they unfold some evidence, it's clear that this character that they're looking for, Greenleaf is his name. Obviously, Jason Greenleaf was the full name, but Greenleaf, or, no, sorry, Greenfield, sorry. I thought to myself just before I started recording, oh, I remember that name, Greenleaf, because it was so unique and different, but I got it wrong. It was actually Greenfield. But regardless, he got involved with like a sort of hacker group of some kind who were all about sort of revolutionizing things through that type of world. But then they got a bit more extreme and actually wanted to kill someone, and this is when he started to kind of pull away from the others. And the belief for some of the episodes is that the hacker group killed him and covered it up, and that's why everything's went down. But of course, when he turns out to still be alive, the hacker group's actually still looking for him so they can kill him. They want to kill him, but they hadn't done it yet. The CIA faked his death and then kept him in a mobile black site for whatever, for in perpetuity, so they can keep questioning him forever. So that's like a lot of that stuff explained very quickly. It would feel weird, I think, to try and go through the episode in order and try and dish out how we find out each of these things like one by one. I think the big notable scene we should probably bring up though is that Finch and this guy Sloan tracked down a storage locker, which didn't belong to Greenfield, but it was opened right after the one Greenfield had was closed, and they were both like under pseudonyms from like people involved in the American Revolution. And they go in and it's empty, but then they get a black light. Finch gets to that idea quite quickly. He's clearly familiar with substances, but they see like all this code on the wall, and it's like they need a cipher for it and all the rest of it. And later on, there's some scenes about looking for the cipher. This is where Reese kind of comes into this plot, because up until this point in the episode, he'd been looking for Shaw, and he'd gotten enough information. We get one Fusco scene this episode, but Fusco kind of passes on the report that Shaw and Root seem to be working together, which obviously makes Finch and Reese concerned. But Reese was nervous about Finch working on his own in a case, so he comes in here and saves him at just the right time, because this storage locker turns out to have a trap that was set by Jigsaw. Basically, once they start taking photos of the text on the wall that they've now found under the blacklight, there's a camera that Finch notices, and they also notice that some of the sprinkler system isn't actually connected to anything else, like the rest of the sprinkler system. The door locks, and then this sprinkler system starts spraying them with gasoline, and then there's a sparker sort of starting to like gear up as if it's trying to blow them up. And luckily, this is where Reese comes in with the axe. So obviously he was keeping tabs and comes in and saves the day, and we get a little explosion. All very nice. And then they're all kind of working together. I was kind of expecting Sloan to turn out to be a bad guy at some point, and he was looking for Greenfield for nefarious reasons. And I think that was mostly just because this actor I just associate with more villainous roles. As much as he wasn't a bad guy on Fringe, just between Dawn of the Planet of the Apes and a couple of other things I've seen him in, he just has kind of a, I don't know, I'm a villain face. There's something about him that just screams villain, but he never turns out to be a bad guy, to be fair. He's hunky-dory. But the other side of all this, which is the more interesting side, I must admit, because it's, it was exciting to see Root again after an episode or two. It's exciting to see her and Shaw as a pair, especially when Shaw wakes up. Root very quickly says, okay, I need to establish trust, so I'll take off the hand restraints. And Shaw immediately like grabs the knife and like holds it to her neck and is threatening her. That was satisfying, because it's like, yeah, Root, of course Shaw is dangerous to you. Like, she can take you out in an instant. You're going to have to convince her. And that's interesting. That's exciting, because it's like, okay, she's not going to force Shaw to do something. She's going to just have to try and convince her that she should do something. And that's far more narratively interesting, because it means the character's got agency. And at this point, we're kind of past Root. I mean, it's fine when she's making like guest stars do stuff, but with the main characters, now it's far more exciting if she's able to convince them that they should do the thing she wants. And that's intriguing. That's kind of what we get here, where she doesn't really know a whole lot of information. She kind of admits the machine only tells her, the next part, right? It's not like she knows the grand scheme. Later on, she says the big picture is the machine's thing. She just knows the next couple of steps so that she can prep them and do them and so on. But it makes it clear that this mission has something to do with saving the machine, or helping the machine. And if it doesn't, happen, then the machine will stop giving out information, and therefore lots of innocent people will die. And that's kind of what seemingly convinces Shaw to play ball for now. Obviously, she is, passive aggressive with Root the entire time. At the end of the episode, when she saves Root from a couple of bad guys, she says, "Oh, is the plan done? Does the job finish? Was it successful?" And as soon as Root says yes, Shaw knocks her out. And I could tell she was going to hit her with a smirk on her face before she did it. There's a nice little performance there from the actress. But all of this stuff was really fascinating. One, because it's okay, what's the machine doing? What's its plan? It cares about this guy in the CIA black site, which turns out to be Greenfield, and that's when the two plots come together and you realize everything Shaw and Root have been doing all episode. Setting up something at this location next to the road, because that's where something's going to go down at the end. They know this is where the hacker group Vigilant are going to try and take Greenfield out of the transport van. So Root plants a gun and a phone there so she can talk to the machine. They do a whole thing where they take out a CIA agent and say, "Hey, now Shaw's going to pretend to be a CIA agent, turning in a prisoner." That prisoner being Root, and that's why Root couldn't do this on her own. She needed a second. She needed someone to be the agent. And there's a lot of little fun things with Root giving her like codes or names or information that she's obviously getting from the machine to help convince the other CIA agents that she is an agent, that she is supposed to be there. And that stuff is fun. It's fun seeing the plans unfold and how the machine's able to like manipulate certain things. Like at one point the walkie-talkie's malfunctioning, and it's clearly the machine making it do it because it leads to a solution that Shaw can present based on the information that Shaw has received from the machine via Root. So all of that stuff is fun. But the really fascinating part is a conversation they have where Root talks about how there's two types of information. There's the relevant, which goes to the government, and there's the irrelevant that goes to Team Machine, right? Or maybe Shaw says that. And then Root corrects her and says, now there's a third kind. There's a third classification of information, and that's going to her. And that's fascinating because, okay, what is that classification, though? If it's not relevant or irrelevant, what is the third kind? That's fascinating. I'm excited to explore that. And this idea of like, we assume it's good. I'd like to think it's all good and for the greater good and for making the world a better place and whatever else. But this early on, we don't really know. So, but I like just hearing these ideas talked about is very entertaining to me. It's very engaging. I'm intrigued. I'm thinking about it. It's getting the neurons firing and thinking about where this is going, and it feels like there's a plan, right? And I'm not talking about the machine's plan here. It feels like the writers have a plan of where this is going. It's felt like that for some time, and given that I've never heard anyone say this is a disappointing like ending, I assume it follows through feeling like that. So all of that stuff was fun. Them being a pair, a partnership was entertaining. There's a couple of moments when they're in the sewer, like using the blowtorch, or I should say the makeshift blowtorch, where, like, because of the lighting, it was kind of a cool little moment where like they're staring each other down, and Root's being all kind of like, how do you describe Root's demeanor with people when she's talking about the machine? She has that kind of like I know stuff and I'm super smart kind of like tone, kind of smug a little bit, but honestly, at times oddly sexy in a way, right? It's got kind of a vibe to it where it almost felt like she was flirting with Shaw a couple of points in this episode. But she's kind of like that with everyone, though. She's like that with everyone. Even Finch, like she always has that kind of, I'm being kind of dangerously flirty with whoever she's talking to. But regardless, all of this like builds up to this big scene where after the bad guys have been able to capture Sloan when they get out of the apartment when they were searching for the cipher key, we end up having this big thing where we get to the point where they're hatching their plan, they're breaking they throw something, I think it's like paint cans in a trolley in front of the transport van, which makes it stop. There's a great little moment here where Reese is obviously following the situation because he's trying to get to Sloan to protect him, and he sees Shaw in the front of the prisoner transport van, And it's just this moment of them looking at each other. But the better part is actually when after this has all happened and Shaw's kicked her way out of the front because the hackers lock her in the front of the truck so she can't get out. She kicks her way out. And there's a moment when Shaw and Reese pass each other, like both on their separate missions, where she says, "Oh, what's up?" Is like, I'm saving someone. He's like, "Yeah, I know the feeling," and they're both like just going about it in the same way, and it's really funny because I feel like there was maybe a tease or a possibility earlier in the episode when Fusco passed on the information that it looked like they were working together, and Reese and Finch were like, "Oh, that's a bit concerning." There was a little bit of a worry almost that they could go down a path where they're going to start not to trust Shaw because it looks bad for a while or something. And I kind of like when it gets to this point in the episode where they just kind of quickly realize that they're both there for different mission reasons. And I really appreciated that Reese just kind of trusted her because he was on his own mission. And like, there's no reason for the I feel like another TV show might have done that. We could have had a whole plot where can we trust Shaw for 3 episodes because of this whole thing with Root. Clearly, a lot of it's explained between them off camera, between scenes, and that's fine. But instantly, it's like, no, we're both on a mission, we're both going to deal with it. And of course, Shaw, as soon as the mission is done, and it's all, whatever the machine wanted has been taken care of, which is that this super hacker guy gets away and, has a location to go to, some contact details, a bank account with money in it, whatever, he's away. Immediately Shaw takes in Root. Like, puts her down so they can detain her because she is a wild card, right? As much as it's exciting following her do stuff for the machine, yeah, from the perspective of the rest of them, she is still kind of a killer and still a little bit unhinged. Even though we know she's devoted to the machine, I get why the others can't just trust her. Because, yeah, we need to build some trust, and we're not really quite there yet with Root in particular, for the other characters, that is. Always exciting to watch, for sure, but very, very different from trusting for the other characters. So all that stuff was good. It's almost a shame that I didn't really care as much about like the wrapping up of the hacker like group and like him shooting Sloan in the leg and Reese having to stay back with him for the ambulance to come. Like, that was all fine. Like, it was all fine stuff. It just wasn't the exciting part of the episode by any means. The brother Greenfield phones him from his like tropical location. And when I say tropical location, what I mean is there's a green screen with a beach on it behind them. I will say this is one of the worst effects that I think the show has done. Maybe not like the worst from like a... there's been a couple of dodgy CG effects. I remember a helicopter in season 1's finale that looked a bit rough. But by and large, the show doesn't have to do a lot of big stuff effects-wise where it would show that it looks bad, right? You get some explosions, those tend to look alright, whatever. But because this was such a prolonged scene of this guy standing on the phone, and the background just looks so fake, it's like, yeah, you didn't go anywhere tropical to film this. You're in a studio right now with a green screen behind you. But, yeah, so it just establishes that he got where he was going and probably doing work for the machine in some way. Whether the machine's contacting him directly or whatever, I don't know. But regardless, fun. We're setting things up. It felt like we're getting to some interesting ground with what the machine's doing now. So yeah, that was good. And obviously the fallout to this, Reese and Finch are having the talk and saying, what do we do about Root? And it's like, yeah, obviously Shaw, when she knocked her out, brought her into the rest of the team, and we see that she is now locked up as a prisoner in the library. She's got a bracelet on. She mentions, actually, she's found out the hard way what will happen if that bracelet like crosses a threshold. She doesn't say what it is, though. I mean, does it electrocute her or something? I don't know. Like, they left that kind of vague for the audience, so we don't really know what it'll do to her when she leaves. Unless this is the same as something we've seen before and I'm just forgetting. But I feel like they've not said yet. But she also points out that she has no technology. There's nothing in here for her to contact the machine, and even if she somehow sneaks something in some way, this cage that's built around this library room is a Faraday cage, which will block any signals from coming in. And Finch is like, yeah, this is for the best. And Ruth says she wants me like to do stuff. Well, you might piss her off. Do you think it's a good idea to make someone that powerful angry? And Finch really ponders an interesting question to her at the end, just before he locks her in, which is, how do you know this is not exactly where the machine wants you to be right now? Because, as she herself said earlier on, she doesn't know the big picture. She doesn't know what the machine wants months from now or weeks from now. She only knows the next couple of steps, because that's what she can enact. It's entirely possible the machine knew after this mission she would likely be taken in by the team, and that this is a good place to keep her until she needs her again. But I think what's more interesting is when the machine wants to use Root again, because it deems her useful for something. I'm excited by the prospect of the machine kind of asking the team, asking Finch to say, hey, we need Shaw for this. However the machine will contact that or give that information over, I don't know. Maybe a text. Who knows? Can the machine even do that? Is it just the phone still? Nah, because Root's talking to it over the thing with the voice. But anyway, I think that's an interesting idea, is that at some point, maybe Finch and the others, but especially Finch, might have to trust the machine, and that'll be to let Root out and like help with something. I think the development of this relationship, and though in the meantime, it definitely feels a little bit like Root's kind of become their Hannibal Lecter behind a cage, and will maybe help a little bit in a sly way, might get into their heads a little bit potentially. I don't know, but like, definitely an interesting setup for the next several episodes, or however long this is going to last with the Root in a cage. But certainly sometime this season, she is going to get out, whether that's because they choose to let her out, which I do think is the most interesting possibility, is that for some reason it's like, we need her help, or the machine says the machine needs her help, and they have to trust the machine. I think that's interesting. I suppose the other little thing that I suppose I should mention here is that I don't think I was totally 100% clear how much Shaw knew about the machine right now. Obviously, in her first episode, there was the big moment where Finch kind of alluded to it a little bit in that big meeting up in the high-rise. But the way that Root talks about the machine in front of Shaw, it doesn't seem to phase her. So it does seem like in the preceding time since that episode, that, you know, since she's been with Team Machine, she does seem to at least be up to date, at least in the same level that Reese might be with the machine and what it is, and knows some stuff. I guess she was there in the finale when they were all looking for it. So maybe that was like when she learned a lot. But yeah, I was thinking like, oh, she doesn't seem as phased about the way Root's talking about the machine, and I wasn't sure like how much like she had been told or grasped about the existence of it and exactly what it was doing. But she seems to know about as much as anyone else other than Finch. So just interesting to know. Anyway, as far as anything else goes, there is a minor subplot with Lasky and Carter, which is Carter's just kind of spying and checking out everything Lasky's doing. Lasky's collecting like protection money from like a local restaurant or whatever. But he basically says, oh, this guy's someone that, you know, we trust, he's loyal to HR. And Carter says, oh, yeah, that loyalty is going to cost him at some point, or whatever. And sure enough, a little bit later in the episode, Simmons calls Lasky down to this same location because the guy in the restaurant had been underpaying them, had been skimming a little bit of the money. And basically, it's implied that he's already killed him, right? This restaurant owner pulled a gun, Simmons or whoever shot him, and Lasky's sort of test, his lesson to learn for being too trusting because he knows the guy, is he's the one that has to go and bury him. It almost feels like we're kind of repeating some ideas here. Not in a bad way, I just mean, because we don't see it or anything, but this idea that he has to go out and dig a grave and bury someone, you know, we've kind of encountered that basic idea before, especially with HR. HR was all over, like, when we did that with Fusco, so it's kind of interesting to sort of bring that thematically back a little bit, and that Lasky, arguably, if there's a possible redemption for Lasky, because it does seem like by the end he's kind of like shocked by what he's been forced to do. He's maybe starting to question his allegiance, and he admits that his real name's this Russian name, and that there's like 12 Russians that have been put into the NYPD via HR to build like a sort of loyal HR force on the whatever, and like just make the bond with the Russians stronger. It feels like he is maybe at a turning point, and I think it's interesting to bring up that he had to dig a grave when that's something Fusco had to do, and Fusco started to show as a corrupt cop and has been, you know, pretty effectively redeemed and become more of a good guy, and maybe it's hinting that Lasky could go that way as well. He might not, but it feels like he might be toying with like a turn. If I have a complaint about this, it's maybe just that it feels a bit quick after like the big revelations last episode. You know, that was a big turning point where Carter took control and said, "You work for me now." I almost feel it's a little bit rushed that he's immediately the next episode having like a moment where he's kind of questioning his loyalty to HR because of something they've made him do. Maybe there's like, maybe there's a timeline here we have to get to a certain point very quickly or whatever, but it does feel a little bit rushed in that sense. So yeah, that was that plot. I think overall this was a great episode. I thought the way the two plots came together again was almost as great as last episode, and was different and interesting because this time it was like an intentional orchestration by the machine. It was the machine putting these two separate groups on the same case, and then when they came together, it didn't feel convoluted because it felt like the machine knew what it was doing, and it was all this big, they literally come together at a crossroads and all interact in the one plot, and that was a very interesting kind of dynamic to have in the episode, even though it's interesting how it kind of harkens back to last episode and how those two plots came together. I think both of those things were great, and they both have their unique qualities, which is also great because I don't just feel like we're repeating anything. Yeah, and all this talk about the machine and what it wants, what it's doing, everything with Root and Shaw was pretty great. And there were some good moments with the other stuff as well, but maybe more typical episode level than, exceptional level, like some of the other stuff in the episode. So I would say that last episode's still my favorite of the season so far. I think last episode was, that was the show firing like pretty much all cylinders. This episode was, like firing most cylinders, right, to a very, very effective degree. So super into it. I didn't even really talk about some of the other little scenes, like when we find out that Greenfield's still alive and he gets put in the cage next to Root, and Root immediately just starts asking him questions and bringing up stuff. Obviously, one of the things that comes up in this episode again is Shaw's father is mentioned. When Root's proving she knows stuff because the machine's told her about Shaw's past, she brings up this time from her childhood, from before her dad died, and Shaw does get kind of angry and says not to mention her father. So, I'm still appreciative of that flashback last time. I just wish it was one scene that was more condensed rather than split up into these little four, nuggets, effectively. So one thing I did on X-Files last review is I picked a scene of the week, and it's something I want to start doing for all the shows. Looking at this episode, there's a few options that I could take. It does seem like it might be tough to not pick the moment where the two plots converge and Greenfield's put in the cage next to Root, and just like the rush of things all happening at that exact moment, that just kind of is like, oh shit, all this starting to come together and make some sense. That's probably the pick, and it's probably just for that rush of plot. Because my reasons for picking a scene of the week could be anything. It could be the cinematography in the scene, it could be something funny, it could be a pivotal plot moment that's just very memorable or whatever. I'd also shout out, though, the Jigsaw style trap. Not because it was like amazing or anything, it just kind of made me chuckle because it did feel like something out of a horror movie for a split second. Like it was really, like, not super complex and elaborate. It was pretty simple to understand, obviously, but it definitely felt a little bit like super villain territory of a plan, of a trap. So yeah, interesting stuff. But yeah, that's my thoughts on Person of Interest for the week. I'll be back next time, and we'll see how we get on with that. But thank you very much for joining me. I always appreciate it. You can, of course, support all the content over at patreon.com/MailFuzzTV and get some bonuses for your trouble over there. But that is me. So thank you once again for watching or listening. I always appreciate it. Keep watching TV. Have you got any vanilla?